Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode in our series of films titled 52 Films and Why 52 Essential Films and Why They Matter. Can't remember that essential part because that's important to this whole thing. And that list is from this book here, which is put out by Turner Classic Movies. It has a forward in here by the late, great Robert Osborne, and all of the films we've been talking about are from here. And today we are discussing a foreign film. I believe it may be one of the first foreign films we've been able to discuss so far, and that is Bicycle Thieves, directed by the great Italian director Vittorio De Sica. Now, this film also has another title, The Bicycle Thief, if you will, or whatever version of Italian they put it in. But Stephen and don't speak fluent Italian, so we had to watch subtitles, which we don't mind at all.
Margarete.
Yeah. Our extensive Italian is what we read on the menus at Italian restaurants, essentially.
Yes. Dominique de Coque. I'm just taking all mine's from Inglourious Bastards.
Yeah. Arrivederci. But this film is part of the genre known as Italian neorealism, which is something that sprouted up in the 1940s and extended into the early 1950s, and it featured such filmmakers as Vittorio De Sica, Roberto Rossellini, Fellini, Visconti, a lot of the great classic Italian filmmakers that a lot of people probably study in film school. And every time I talk about this film, Bicycle Thieves, I always say this is probably taught in every film school on the planet. For me, my first introduction into this film was my first film course I ever took, which was discussing classic film, and we talked about Italian neorealism. I had no idea what it was. I was brand new to foreign cinema, and this is the film that kind of hooked me into foreign cinema, and I've had a love affair with it ever since, and it's been very satisfying. But Stephen, is this the first time you've seen it for this time, or had you seen it before?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it one other time before, and I will say Andrew here is the one that introduced me to it. And yeah, I mean, it's not my introduction, but it is definitely, it might have been my introduction to Italian cinema, definitely. But yeah, I mean, this film really, kind of getting into its essentials, not all the way, but it's definitely an essential. It's definitely a must see in this, from this book. And it's one of the more simpler concepts. We were kind of talking about this before we started. We were like, this is maybe one of the most simplest concepts I've ever heard for a film that ends up being one of the great films of all time.
Yeah, which is incredible how basic it is, yet it's so complex. And we'll get into the plot very, very soon. But that is kind of the way Italian neorealism films were or are. The essential ones are they're stripped down, very basic, and these films were kind of an answer to the void left after World War II, because if for those of you who are not familiar with history or political history or anything like that, Italy was run by Mussolini, and of course, when he was thrown out of power, the country had to kind of rebuild itself. And these films kind of look at the lower class, the working class, the poor, essentially, people who are really just trying to survive. And the great thing about these films is that they are shot on location, so you definitely see the ambiance of how the destruction of World War II plays a role in these people's lives. And this film deals specifically with a father who was trying to provide for his family. They are kind of on the poor side. You kind of get that gist. They are really just trying to survive. And he essentially needs his bicycle in order to do the job that he has been given by what I assume is an unemployment office. There's a lot of people just waiting to get jobs from anywhere they can, whether it's physical labor or whatever. And he gets this job, but he needs this bicycle. And our early kind of interactions with him is he has to get this bicycle back from where it is, and where it is in a pawn shop. And he has to find some way to do it. And right away, you see that a lot of people have given their stuff to pawn shops in order to survive, in order to get food for their families, because there are great shots early on inside the pawn shop where there's just a row of bicycles that people have just given to this pawn shop. And the way pawn shops go is that you basically lend it to them and you say you're going to come back and get it at some point, or they basically own it by a certain date. And we assume watching this film that that's probably the case for many people. And he and his wife basically pawn their bed sheets, and they basically say, we don't need these, we can sleep on just the comforter. And what is so telling about that moment is that later, that after he reacquires his bike, he looks inside and there's just a giant wall of just people's bed sheets that they've pawned in. And it's very telling about the social climate that this film is dealing with, and the social climate of Italy at the time for the working class. There's a lot of political stuff in this film. Also, if you can't already tell, we're going to spoil the plot of this movie. So watch this movie before you get here, unless you don't care about spoilers. But I've talked enough. I want to hand it over to Steven for him to say something.
Oh, well, yeah, yeah. This film very much gets you in the sets it up perfectly to let you know that this character's just trying to get by and is trying to provide for his family. That's kind of one of the essential themes of this movie, is just this kind of like duty, this responsibility to provide for one's family, and that pressure that comes with that. And because of the situation of that time, the war, jobs are hard to come by. So when he finally gets a job at the beginning of the film, where you have all these other unemployed workers waiting to get something, our main character gets a break and gets a job. And unfortunately, which if I was him, I wouldn't have said anything in general. I would have just went off. But he decides to say, oh, I don't know if I have a bike to do this job, because he has to have a bike to do this job. And he's like, no, I'll get the bike. But he's like, hey, no, if you don't have a bike, don't take the job. It's like, well, I'll get it. I wouldn't have said anything.
Yeah.
But he said something, and then had a little bit of a talk there for a second, but he got away. And then he makes his way home, and he's just kind of like just bummed. He's like, well, I got this great job, but I can't take the job because I don't have a bike. And which is like, it makes you really think about like the things you complain about. Of course, this is the 40s, but still, it's like, this dude just needs a bike to do his job. And we complain about like, I don't have enough money to go to the movies, or like the luxuries we have, or like, this dude just needs a bike. It's like, yeah. I feel like getting a bike is super easy. Like,
what is so amazing is this entire plot revolves around this bicycle. And to us today, as a modern audience, bicycles are not that big of a deal. I mean, for me personally, I haven't ridden a bike since I got my learner's permit when I was like 15 or 16. I graduated to cars, and that was it for me. I'm like throwing the bikes behind. No more pedaling uphill for me. But this bike is his lifeline. It's his lifeline to a job to provide for his family. And when that is taken away, because he gets this job of hanging posters all across town, all across the city, and coincidentally the posters are of Rita Hayworth, which is an interesting kind of classic film reference there. At the time, Rita Hayworth was a huge star across the world. But that's interesting, and it gets stolen from him, hence the title of the film, Bicycle Thieves. There's these two guys that kind of coordinate this little theft, if you will. One guy grabs it, and the other guy kind of runs distraction. He stands in front of them, and he says, oh, what do you do? What's going on? And then the guy gets away. And the rest of the film is basically him trying to recover this bike, because it represents hope. It represents some sliver of happiness for his family. And we go from there to the usual steps one would take. You chase the guy down, but he gets away because you're on foot, he's on a bike. And then you go to the local police station, and they kind of just completely disregard it. Like, yeah, we'll have the whole patrol out looking for it, because something like that is so minuscule to everyone else but to him, but to our main character, it means the world. And what is interesting about this film is that, and about Italian neorealism in general, is they didn't use professional actors most of the time. Sometimes they did, but these guys weren't big name actors. I couldn't tell you the name of the actors in this film without looking it up, you know. And it's very telling that you're able to get such a great performance from these actors, from this actor particularly, even though he's not a professional. And you see, as soon as that bike gets stolen, his whole world is starting to crumble. You know what I mean? His lookout of the world is going down very, very quickly. And he becomes very desperate as the film goes on. As he's trying to track down this bike, he takes certain steps to do so. First, going to the police, they're no help. Then he goes to kind of the I guess friends or working class, or kind of not, or people who I guess like have their ear to the ground, because there is this underground meeting of workers, almost like a union, but I'm guessing that unionization stuff like that was not allowed at the time. Probably, definitely, probably not under Mussolini, and probably not afterwards as well. So they have to meet underground. So there's probably a whole network of workers and people that are kind of locked into kind of the seediness of the world, because after he meets with his friends, they decide to go on a little pilgrimage to the various markets that essentially sell mostly legal goods, but probably stolen stuff as well.
Yeah, I mean, literally, it's a needle in a haystack. I mean, there's so many bike parts and tires and everything that's just hanging around, and they finally make their way, and he thinks that he sees this guy, and he's got like the middle section of the bike, and he's painting it, and of course that makes you think, okay, he's stripping a bike and selling it, and so he decides to stop the guy and be like, hey, tell me the serial number of that bike, because my bike's been stolen. I want to know if that's my bike. And of course, the guy's reluctant. He doesn't want to show it to him. The kid goes, his son, which is another great. He's very good in the movie. His little son, he's kind of got some spunk to him. He's a little bit of a back talker, a little bit, but he goes and gets a cop, and then the cop makes him say get to look at the serial number, and it ends up not being his bike. And this is kind of the start point of where the main character starts to kind of slowly but surely kind of like show more desperation. Like, it starts here, and then suddenly throughout the movie he starts accusing more and more people, or getting himself in the middle of other scuffles to try to get his bike back, and ends up kind of slowly degrading himself, even more than he already feels.
And along for his kind of wild ride of a day is his very young son, who were introduced right after he gets his job. We're introduced to him and his wife. We're introduced to the little boy and his mother, his wife, of course. And he has a job too that we see very briefly early on. That it looks like he works at a filling station, at a gas station, doing something. But that's not really talked about in the film. So it seems that everybody in this family has to work when you reach a certain age. That seems to be the thing for a lot of families, even now so. And his son kind of follows him along the way, and his son sees his father getting increasingly more desperate, going down a dark path. There are several instances in the film where the father kind of ignores his son and just presses forward. There's certain little hints of that where the little boy is chasing after his father, and he'll stumble in the street and his father won't even notice. And there are also other instances where his father kind of abandons him a little bit, but that is later on in the film. But jumping off what Steven was saying, yeah, this marketplace is just futile. There are bikes are stripped down to absolutely nothing. This happens today a lot too, and they're broken down to all their basic parts, and you sell each part individually. That happens with cars as well too, but this film concentrated on bikes, of course. And yeah, while watching this that it is just desperately not going to happen. There's no way he's going to find that bike in the crowd in this marketplace. So he goes to another marketplace, and that's where he sees the person who stole his bike, this young individual who he's off in the distance, and he notices him, and he chases him once again, but he notices that this young man interacts with this older gentleman, and kind of the guy who, I guess, I don't know, maybe a middleman, maybe somebody, a thief who's working with him, or whatever. But then he keeps threatening him and chasing him, and he chases him to this church. I think this is a very interesting scene in the film, because the church is a place that's um, feeding the poor, and they're having a mass and all this kind of stuff, and it's this place of worship, this holy place of charity and all that stuff. And he kind of goes crazy in there, desperately crazy in there, and he completely disregards the fact that this is a church, this is not the way you're supposed to act here, because he's so fixated on this bike, on getting this bike back, on getting the information out of this old man who is seemingly just another poor person who tried to get by any way they can. And that is a huge running theme throughout this film, is that people are just as desperate as the person next to them. And I don't know what you thought of this scene in general in the church, but I thought it was, like I said, I thought it was really
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. Yeah, it's another, like I said, another kind of level of his degradation of just like this character who's just continuously more and more desperate. And you know, it's sad. And I mean, really, ultimately, at the core, after you've seen this movie once and you go back and watch it again, it becomes more sad just watching this man who, at the beginning of the film, got a new job and was very happy and was wanting to just do what most normal people want to do, and what some people are too cowardly to do, which is just to take care of their family. And in their situation, hard situation, it's even harder. You know, taking care of a family is hard enough, but doing it in their situations is crazy. It's just sad. This movie is a sad movie.
It's a very sad movie, and there's another scene that happens after this where he takes his son to get some food. At this, it's not an upper class restaurant anyway, but you know, you can tell it's out of their comfort zone. It's out of their monetary range, and his son keeps looking back at this boy at another table, and you can tell that that family is significantly more well off than this father and son pair. And he keeps looking back, keeps looking back, keeps imitating that boy, because he wants to be that boy. He wants that sense of comfort. He wants to be just like everyone else, but monetarily, they obviously are not. And it's really interesting how that scene works out. Because while I'm watching it, I'm like, man, I hope this guy is not blowing all of his money on this one meal. That's not even a grand meal. It's, you know, it's
It was
essentially a mozzarella sandwiches.
yeah, mozzarella with bread. That's
Yeah,
it.
which, I mean, sounds good to us, but I mean, uh, I'd eat it. But it's another scene where it just shows the dichotomy, the difference in class that exists at the time, and it's a very much a critique of everything, because also that other boy looks extremely bored while eating. Like, he looks like he eats here every single day, and he's just tired of eating mozzarella and pasta and all this stuff. While the young boy, who I believe his name is Bruno, yes, his name is Bruno, um, who, and the main guy we've been talking about this whole time, his name is Antonio. So you have Antonio and his son Bruno, and Bruno is just so damn happy to be eating this. You know, this is like the world to him. And in the back of my mind while watching this, I'm like, this is probably the best meal this kid's ever had.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
and
and like you said, it almost, you're like, okay, are you? It feels like he's given up, you know, and
yeah,
you know, right before that I think he'd gotten really upset at his son, and this was a way to, you know,
yeah,
this was a
yeah,
way for him to make him feel better, I think. And you know, after this, he kind of goes to an even more desperate means,
yeah,
which is him going back to where he lives and meeting with this kind of like holy lady, which earlier in the film his wife had went in to talk to her, and he basically said she was dumb for going in and talking to
yeah.
her.
Yeah, basically, like, after that whole confrontation at the church, backtracking just a little bit, he got the information of where that young man lived,
Yes.
but he at the time was, but then afterwards he was feeling extremely down, really just depressed, if you will, and he tells his son to kind of just, he actually hits his son, I believe,
Yes.
and the son's like, yeah, I'm not gonna, why'd you do that? I don't want to be near you, and the father's like, oh fine, just go away then, you've been bothering me all day, just go away. And then all of a sudden, he hears that someone's in the water, like, oh, there's a kid drowning, and he thinks it's his son. And so immediately his emotion changes, his tone changes, and he becomes super dad. He
Well, yeah.
becomes
I
very
mean,
protective.
his whole ultimately his whole reason for this is unselfish. It's doing it for his family.
Yeah,
So to lose his family, any part of his family, would negate his reason to do what he's doing now.
true, very true. And I mean, yeah, of course he would be naturally protective of his son. So in order to make up for this whole situation he got himself in, that's when they go to this restaurant. And then after, as Stephen was saying, he goes back and visits this fortune teller lady who kind of just is kind of a bit of a con
Oh,
artist.
she's definitely a con artist.
She
Yeah,
tells him stuff like, she tells him this, I'm paraphrasing, because he mentions like my bike was stolen, whatever. And the advice she gives him is like, you'll either find it quickly or you won't find it at all. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty
well, I
obviously.
mean, it's like when he went to the cops, they could
Yeah,
not give him any help, and then they pay her. I wouldn't have paid her.
yeah. Then he pay, yeah. Then everybody pays her, and everyone in this little town keeps going to her. And it's interesting how throughout this film he can't get any help from certain establishments. The police won't help him. At the church, they kind of just keep harassing him and try to force him out and kick him out when he's trying to, you know, get information from this man to get his bike back, to help his family. And now he goes to the local superstitious lady. He even goes down to, he's getting desperate, as we've been saying.
That's it. That's
And
the
he
net.
gets no help.
Yeah, go to the fortune teller lady is like the bottom.
Yeah. He does get help from his friends, his worker friends, or whatever. They do try to help him, as we mentioned earlier, going to the marketplaces and stuff. But other than that, no other main institution will help him. And it's kind of a social commentary on how perhaps the Italian institution, the government, is kind of not helping the people the way they should. Not giving the people jobs, not giving the people adequate ability to get food for the family and all that kind of stuff. That's probably in there. But after that, I believe is when he goes to confront the young man who he believes stole his bike.
Yeah, I mean,
Am I right?
he leaves his house and then
Yeah.
he notices a young man walking up the street and recognizes him and then starts to follow him. And then the kid realizes that he's being followed and takes off
Yeah.
and runs into a house with all these other ladies. It looks like it's like a comfort house with a bunch of women or something. That's what it looked like. And
That's what I thought initially too. But
yeah,
then it turned out like that's where the kid lives.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so he goes in there, and this is a neighborhood he's not, doesn't seem like he's known in this neighborhood, and he goes in there and pulls the kid out, and violently. He doesn't, just say get out. I mean, he tries to tell him to come out and tell me where I'm about, but he grabs this guy by the shirt and is just like, give me my bike back, and everybody's telling him this is a good kid, he didn't take your bike, blah blah. He takes him outside, and then suddenly, and it's like these people come from nowhere.
Oh yeah, a huge
yeah.
crowd of people.
Huge crowd of people just start surrounding him as he's arguing with this kid and telling him to give his bike back. And nobody's on this guy's side. Everybody's like, he does not have your bike. He does not, everybody's just getting in his face. And it is maybe my favorite scene in the movie, just because they capture the when the crowd starts to turn on him. It becomes it's intense. Like it feels real.
Yeah, this is when his son gets the cop. The cop comes over and says, "Okay, what's going on?" And then he explains, my bike was stolen earlier. I saw this kid steal my bike, and then he's okay. We'll go inside. We'll look for your bike. And you're watching the scene. You're like, "There's no way there's a bicycle here at all. If this kid is indeed the kid that stole this bike is gone, long gone." He probably sold it already, or gave it to somebody. And there's no one in this town that's going to corroborate, because you get the sense that every community is very tight knit, that they all got each other's backs. And I think a lot of that has to do with um, coming out of World War II and all that kind of stuff. A lot of communities became very close knit because they had to, depend on each other to survive during wartime and stuff like that. And so it's not like in his neighborhood where he could go to the local workers and say, "Oh, my bike's been stolen. Can you help me find it?" And they'll be like, "Oh, okay. I'll check around. I'll do this. If it's not there, it'll be here." All this kind of stuff. In this neighborhood, he is an alien. He is foreign to them. He is a threat to them. So they immediately turn on him, and as come to find out, they can't find the bike at all. And the police officer's like, "You have no witnesses. You didn't get any statements from anybody. You can press charges, but nothing is going to happen. You're just going to be wasting your time."
Yeah,
Basically telling him it, this is a waste of time. This whole journey to find your bike is kind of a waste of time.
yeah, and also the kid he's accusing kind of goes into a seizure.
He does have a seizure, yes.
Yeah, yeah, and let me ask you this: do you think this kid actually was the one that stole his bike, or do you think this was real? That this kid wasn't a part of it, and he actually had a seizure and was freaking out? And what did you think?
Well, we got a good look at the kid who stole his bike early in the film, and it looks very similar to this kid.
Yeah,
I can kind of believe that this kid did steal the bike and is lying now. Just
yeah,
because, yet again, it goes back to that whole desperation thing where these people have to do anything to survive. So if stealing a bike and lying about it profusely, faking a seizure, having a real seizure, whatever the situation is, they're gonna do it.
yeah.
It's almost like any means necessary in order to get by. So I'm not. I know that's kind of a walk around answer, but that's my answer.
Yeah, I've never really went back and looked to see if they look very similar. I've never really took a look, but in my mind, I've always thought that maybe he just wanted it to be him, and because he had gotten to this point where he slowly he's trying to find somebody to blame. He's trying to find a way to get his bike back, and we're getting close to where it really tips over at the end. But I'll let
straws, and as we're talking, we're getting towards the end. Here at the end, there were no straws left to grasp. Essentially, at the very end of this film, he gives money to his son. It says, "Okay, take the trolley back to where we live. Go home." Basically, go home, because he doesn't want his son to see him do what he's about to do, which is steal a bicycle. He's about to become a bicycle thief. He is basically becoming what he's been chasing this entire movie, because he is now that desperate. And he does try. He makes an attempt at it. He grabs the bike. He attempts to get away, and everybody's chasing him. There's like everybody seems to turn and chase him. It's very interesting, contrasting earlier in the film where his bike was stolen and nobody helped him. Nobody helped when he was yelling thief and thief, and nobody helped chase this guy. But in this part of town, whatever the situation is, they all chase him, and of course they catch him.
Well, yeah, I mean, also he didn't think it through very well, because I mean, this kid, the people that stole his bike were smart enough to steal a bike on a downhill where you could pick up speed very, very fast. And he was like in a very, very much a crowded area, next to a stadium where people were leaving the stadium, and it was on flat surface. There was no picking up speed by going down a hill. No. So it wasn't a very. He's not a thief, so he didn't really think it out. He was trying to make a decision whether to take a bike that was kind of by itself off to the side, or one of these many bikes that were sitting in front of the stadium. And he decides to go for the one by itself, and ends up getting they jumped right on him.
Yeah. When he's making the decision to steal the bike or not steal the bike is a scene I've always liked in this film, because it's great. It has great tension. It's also done really well. With the theme is playing and all that kind of stuff, and not the theme, the music is playing. It's kind of welling up, You don't know what he's going to do. He keeps looking at the bike, looking back at his son, looking at the bike, looking back at his son, gives his son the money, then goes and do it. And as Steven said, wasn't planned out very well, and he got caught right away. And they're about to bring him. They're about to have him arrested. You know, but he is a bicycle thief. They're gonna arrest him, but his son steps in, and the guy's like, "Oh, forget it. It's not worth it." You know what I mean? The guy takes kind of the high. The guy is kind of a nice guy about it. Takes the high road and is like, "Yeah, forget about it." And and then the movie ends with he and his son kind of walking away, and he has the most defeated look on the face on someone's face that you will ever see in a film. Just completely done. You know what I mean? Like the bicycle is gone, the future is unknown. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I got my son and I'm going home. And that's how the movie ends. And it ends very, very sourly, very, very sadly, as Stephen mentioned earlier. This is a film that we could talk about many, many times. You can analyze every single scene, every which way, and they probably do that, like I said, in every it. But this is just such a classic film for me. I recommend it to anyone, even if you're not a foreign film lover like I am or Steven is. I still recommend it because there is so much to deem from it when it comes to social commentary and class commentary and kind of contextual commentary of the time. And also, Italian neorealism is a really interesting, unique genre of film that I highly recommend people delving into Italian cinema because it went through a lot of changes between um, World War II and now, just like every other genre does. But Stephen, do you have anything left to add to our discussion here?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest point on why this is an essential film, like a lot of these movies in this book, they're timeless. This is a timeless movie with timeless themes. People can relate to this movie today. You know, even if it's not, you know, you're not into foreign films, you're not into classic films. This theme of somebody just trying to make their way in this world um, is something that continues to have movies being made about it. You know, we see it in so many different iterations, and it's just why I connected with it. You know, everybody has struggles, you know, and everybody has moments in their life where they feel like that maybe they did something questionable um, to just get by or to just have something they wanted or needed. And it's just I'm glad I saw the movie. I'm glad Andrew, you know, suggested it to me. I bought it right away. You see it there behind me, and it's on Criterion Collection, guys. It's if you're getting into Criterions, get this one. It's one of the must Criterions.
Yeah, it's available on DVD and Blu-ray. Obviously, if you're a collector, buy this. If you're for physical media, I believe it is probably on Filmstruck, the streaming service that's done by Turner Classic Movies and Criterion. If it's not, I'm sorry, I didn't look it up beforehand. But what is available is the book here, TCM's 52 Essential Films and Why They Matter. The inspiration behind this series of videos that we have been doing, Stephen and I have been doing, as well as the leader of this channel, the proprietor of this channel, Dan Skip Allen, who does a lot of these videos as well, and a couple of other friends of ours, Mark Tordai and Billy Pollahan, and perhaps some other guests will be joining us eventually. But yes, this has been a very great discussion about a very great film. You can find me, apart from doing these videos, on Twitter at Cabzilla, Twitter on Cabzilla06, and on YouTube at Cabzilla Productions. Stephen, where can you be found?
You can find me on Film Club Central on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. We're always doing stuff. And we got another news episode coming. We do a news every Sunday and all that's junk. And yeah, and just keep watching out for these 52 must-see movies and why they matter. We got a lot more to go. We think we've only done about maybe 10 or something like, I don't know, 10 to 15. And
Yeah, I don't keep count.
yeah, I don't keep count either, but we got a lot more to do. So You got like a
Yeah.
year's worth of these videos.
There will be 52 at some point.
Yeah, we're working our way.
You're working our way. Nice. All right. So until next time, see you later.